You owe us that much anyway. That is what my sister texted me the morning I discovered $12,000 had been charged to my credit card without my knowledge, without my consent, and without a single phone call asking if it was okay. 7 words, no apology, no explanation. Just a sentence written as if I were a debt they were collecting on, as if I had taken something from them by existing and this was the reasonable correction. I want you to hold that sentence in your mind for a moment, because it tells you everything about how my family understood me, and because what my sister Renee did not know, what none of them knew was that I had been quietly keeping a record. I'll tell you exactly what that record contained. But first, I need to tell you how a person ends up with $11,847 charged to her card by her own sister and why her first phone call wasn't to the bank. It was to a 67-year-old woman named Margaret who lived in the blue house next door and kept a garden I used to watch from my kitchen window on Saturday mornings when I should have been sleeping. None of them saw what that call would eventually cost them. Welcome back. This is the space where we tell the kinds of stories that people carry alone for too long, quiet stories about ordinary people who got tired of being overlooked and found a way, without raising their voices, to stop being overlooked for good. If you have ever had someone in your family treat your generosity as a debt they were owed, if you have ever watched the people who were supposed to protect you choose someone else instead, and if you have ever felt the particular exhaustion of loving people who have decided your love is a given and their behavior is negotiable, this one is for you. Stay with me because the turn in this story doesn't happen at the bank. It doesn't happen in any lawyer's office. It happens at a kitchen table in Harwick, Indiana, with a green ledger sitting open between two women and a September light going gold through the window, and a column of numbers that had finally, after a very long time, added up to something clean. Leave a comment below if any of this is landing. And subscribe if you're new here because we are just getting started. Now let's go back to the beginning. My name is Claire Hendricks, and I was 31 years old the summer my sister took $11,847 from me and texted me about it like she had done me a service. I should tell you what kind of person I was before I tell you what happened, because the kind of person you are matters enormously when someone in your family decides to take from you, and it matters even more when you have to decide what to do about it. I was the kind of person who kept a budget in a green ledger notebook. The old-fashioned paper kind, with the columns already ruled in light blue and the cardboard cover that goes soft at the corners after enough years in a bag. I had bought that particular ledger at a drugstore when I was 19 and just moved into my first apartment in Harwick, Indiana, with $340 in my checking account and a mattress I had dragged in off the curb on the last Thursday of August when people left things on the street before the semester started. I was working 2 jobs that year. Days at a copy center running the machines and answering the counter, evenings answering phones for a medical billing office in the same office park, walking between them in 22 minutes because I had counted. By 23, I had put myself through a paralegal certification at night, the kind of program that is not glamorous and is not what people mean when they ask where you went to school, but that taught me how to read a contract, how to track a document, and how to understand that paper has memory even when people don't. By 27, I was working at a small firm on Clover Street doing litigation support. By 31, I had the apartment I lived in alone, a car that ran, a credit card with a $15,000 limit that I had spent 2 years earning after my early adult years had left my credit report looking like a document written in red ink, and a green ledger on my kitchen table where every number I spent or earned had a row. I paid the credit card in full every month, not once missed. I am not telling you this to sound disciplined in a way that asks for admiration. I am telling you because that card, that $15,000 limit that I had rebuilt from nothing with careful monthly payments over 3 years, was the thing Renee used. And the way she used it told you the precise shape of what she thought about the work I had done to earn it. My family is the Hendricks of Harwick, which sounds like more than it is. My parents, Larry and Sandra, had lived in the same house on the east side for 34 years. A two-story that sat on a quiet street and had a porch my mother kept clean and a backyard my father had not done much with. The house had been refinanced twice, which I knew only in the loose way you know things about your parents' finances when no one has ever been direct with you about them. My father worked maintenance for the county. My mother had managed the front desk of a pediatric office for 25 years until her knees made the long-standing difficult. They were not wealthy people, but the specific way they were not wealthy had always been organized around a set of understandings, quiet ones, never stated directly about which daughter was the responsible one and which daughter needed looking after. Those categories had been assigned long before either of us was old enough to have earned them. Renee is 3 years younger than me, and she is the kind of pretty that makes people in Harwick forgive things and then forget they forgave them. She had learned very early that being forgiven and being deserving of forgiveness are two entirely different things, and that in a family with the particular dynamics of ours, you only needed one of them to get by. She had dropped out of two different community college programs, one in cosmetology and one in early childhood education, each time at a point that was close enough to the end that you could still imagine she might go back but far enough along that the money was gone. She had held a series of jobs, waitress, receptionist, retail, each one ending in a way that the story changed slightly every time it was told. She had a boyfriend named Travis who drove a truck and had strong opinions and no income I was ever able to account for. And together they lived in my parents' house in the way of people who have decided that shelter is a right and maintenance is someone else's concern. My parents had arranged their entire emotional economy around Renee's needs in a way that was so old it had stopped feeling like a choice. It was just how the house ran. When Renee was unhappy, the house was unhappy. When Renee needed something, it got found. When Renee failed, there was an explanation that arrived before the facts did, and the explanation was almost always about hardship and how much she had been through and how some people did not understand how hard her life was. I understood. That was the thing. I did not hold any of this against Renee in the years before the $11,847 because I had grown up inside the same logic and I knew it was not a logic anyone had chosen deliberately. It was just what had calcified over time, a family's habits turning into a family's structure. The way water moving the same path long enough eventually makes a groove you cannot see until your foot is in it. Here is what I want you to understand about me and my family in the years before that July. I had been sending money home for 6 years, not a large amount, but every month $200 because my mother had asked once in the voice she used when the asking cost her something tight and careful, and I had heard it, and I had said yes. I had paid the $680 when my father's truck needed a transmission the spring before, because he had mentioned it twice, and I could see what the mentioning was for. I had paid the insurance deductible the year my mother was briefly in the hospital, because no one else was going to. I did these things because they were my parents and because watching them go without was something I could not do, and because I had long ago arranged my internal accounting to file all of it under love, which is the category that does not ask to be balanced. What I did keep carefully in the green ledger was my own money. Every dollar in, every dollar out, the credit card balance always listed as zero on the first of the month because it was always paid in full. I knew my numbers the way you know something you have worked very hard for, specifically down to the cent. The balance notification that came through on a Tuesday morning in July was not a number I had made, $11,847 in charges I had not authorized. My hands did not shake when I opened the account portal. I am a paralegal. I read things carefully for a living. I have read documents in cases involving financial ruin, domestic deception, forged contracts, and I have learned to hold my face still when the numbers say something terrible. I applied that same stillness to my own screen. I went down the list line by line: a resort on the Outer Banks of North Carolina, 6 nights, 2-room rates, which meant 2 rooms, which meant 4 people, spa services, specific line items for massages and a facial. 3 restaurant charges spread across 3 evenings. Excursion bookings: a kayak tour, a lighthouse trip, a car rental for 6 days, a gift shop charge on the last day that was $247 by itself, everything dated from the Thursday of the prior week through the Tuesday of the current one, and on every day of that stretch I had been in Harwick, Indiana, sitting at my desk on Clover Street. I sat with the screen, I did the math, $11,847, then my phone lit up with a text. Hey, just so you know, we got back from the beach this morning. Travis and I and mom and dad. It was so needed. We used your card. Hope that's okay. We'll get you back. You owe us that much anyway, lol. I read it twice. Then I read it a third time because the sentence "you owe us that much anyway" had a shape I wanted to understand clearly before I did anything else. It was not a joke, even with the lol attached. It was a statement of position. It was Renee telling me in 7 words what she believed the terms of our family had always been: that my resources existed in a pool that included her, and that using them was not theft but correction. I set my phone down. I went to my bag, I took out the green ledger, I opened it to a clean page, and I started writing. I should tell you what I did not do in the hours after that text, because the things you do not do when you are frightened and hurt are often the things that matter most later. I did not call Renee screaming. I did not call my parents and make threats. I did not post about it anywhere. I did not cry in my car in the parking garage under my building the way I had done after other hard things in my life, my hands on the wheel and the engine off and the grief just sitting there. I did not do any of those things, and I want to be honest with you about why, because it was not because I was calm. I was not calm. There was a heat moving through me that I recognized as something between fury and grief. The specific temperature of realizing that a person you love has decided you are a thing they can use. But I was a paralegal. I had spent years watching families take crises and light them on fire in the middle of courtrooms by saying the wrong thing in the wrong moment, the text sent in anger that became Exhibit A, the screaming voicemail played back before a judge who had seen it all before. I knew from watching that happen to other people that the person who loses their composure first hands the story to the other side. So I sat down at my desk. I wrote every charge in the ledger: date, merchant, amount, transaction ID, all of it in 2 neat columns in pencil. Then I texted Renee one sentence: I didn't authorize any charges. Please call me when you can. She read it. She did not call. I took a screenshot of her original text and saved it with a name and a date. I took screenshots of the charge portal. I took a screenshot of her read receipt, then I went back to work. Every hour that day, when I thought of something else I needed to write down, I wrote it. The 6 years of $200 monthly payments, the transmission, the deductible, amounts and dates as far back as I could reconstruct from my own records, which went back the full 6 years because I was the kind of person who kept records. When I was done, I had almost 2 full pages in the ledger and a feeling that was beginning to settle towards something I could work with. I want to stop here for a second because I know some of you have sat at a desk after something like this and gone very still in a way that frightened you a little. That stillness that is not calm, that is just the mind collecting itself because it has decided something and the body hasn't caught up yet. If you know that stillness, leave 1 word below for me. Just one. I read them all and I will know what it means. And if you want to stay for the part where the ledger ends up in front of people who did not know it existed, subscribe before you forget to. Now back to it. I gave Renee one full day before I called my parents, not because I expected anything different, but because I had been raised in this family and I knew the order in which things happened. Renee would have called my mother within hours of my text. My mother would have had a version of events prepared by morning, and that version would be the one I had to address before it fully set. My mother answered on the first ring. There was a particular gentleness in her voice that told me exactly how long she had been rehearsing. She started with the vacation context. Larry and Sandra had not taken a real trip in years. Renee and Travis had been going through a hard stretch. She could not go into detail over the phone, but it had been difficult, and when Renee suggested a family trip together, it had seemed like what they needed. And Renee had mentioned that I had offered them use of my card in case of emergencies. I had offered no such thing. I said that plainly without raising my voice. I had never offered my card to anyone, not for emergencies and not for vacation, not ever. There was a pause. Then my mother said Renee had specifically told them I'd said it was fine. I opened the ledger to a clean page and I wrote that down. I asked my mother whether she had called me before any charge was made. She said no. I asked whether she had sent a text. No, I asked whether there had been any contact between any of them and me before $11,847 was charged to my account. She said it had come together quickly and they had thought I would not mind given everything. Given everything, I wrote those two words with a small box around them. Then she moved to the second part of the conversation, the one she had been building toward from the beginning. She said family helped each other. She said I knew how much they had done for me over the years. She said that I had a good job, that Renee had a harder situation, and that those two facts were related in a way she hoped I could see. And she said, and this is the sentence I wrote down and underlined, she said she hoped I was not going to make this into something. I told her I was not going to make it into anything. I told her I was going to handle it. She seemed reassured by that. She should not have been. I called my father that evening. He said even less. He said the weather had been nice. He said Renee meant well. He said he hoped it could all be sorted out quietly, which was the sentence he had used for every difficult thing I had witnessed in 31 years of being his daughter. The sentence that meant do not ask me to take a side out loud. I told him I understood and I hung up. The next morning, I walked into the office an hour early and I sat alone with the green ledger and I thought with as much precision as I was capable of at 7:30 in the morning. I was a paralegal. I knew what $11,847 in unauthorized charges on a credit card was. It was not a family misunderstanding. It was not a miscommunication about an offer I had never made. Under Indiana law, what Renee had done had a name and the name was not complicated. What I had to decide was what I wanted to happen, not what I was entitled to, not what I deserved. What I wanted specifically in terms I could describe to a second person. I thought about that for a long time. There was exactly one person I wanted to talk to before I did anything. Margaret Ellery had lived in the house next to mine for as long as I had lived in my apartment, which was 4 years. She had a blue two-story with white trim and a garden that ran the full length of the fence we shared. The kind of garden that clearly had a plan even when it was also clearly being improvised. Season by season, with additions and corrections in the beds that she would stand at the fence and explain to me on Saturday mornings when I brought my coffee outside. She had been widowed 7 years ago and she had kept the house going alone in the quiet, competent way of someone who had arranged their whole life to run on their own power. Before she retired, Margaret had spent 30 years in financial compliance. She had explained this to me briefly and without emphasis the first time we talked at the fence, the way people mention a former life that still shapes the current one but does not need to define it. I had filed it away, and 3 years before the summer of the $11,847, when my landlord tried to illegally raise my rent by $300 without proper notice, and I was furious and unsure what to do, I had knocked on Margot's door on a Saturday morning and asked if she had a minute. She had made tea and sat across from me at her big kitchen table and listened to the whole situation without once telling me not to worry, which is the thing people say when they want you to calm down rather than solve the problem. Then she told me exactly what I was entitled to do in what order and what to keep in writing. My landlord corrected the rent within 2 weeks and apologized in a letter I still have. I knocked on her door that Saturday morning in July. She opened it before I had finished the second knock. "Come in," she said. "I made coffee." I sat at her kitchen table, which was covered that morning in seed catalogs and a pair of reading glasses and a mug that was already half empty because she had been up for hours. I told her everything in the orderly way I had learned by then, the way you tell things when you need the other person to have the full picture. I showed her the ledger, I showed her the screenshots, I showed her Renee's text. Margaret read the text. Then she set the phone down. She folded her hands on the table the way people do when they are about to say something that requires their full attention. She said, "What do you want to happen?" I told her. I wanted the money back. I wanted it documented. And I wanted a record that could not be softened later, the way my family had a habit of softening things until the facts lost their edges and the story stopped having anyone in it who had done anything wrong. She nodded. "Then you need to do things in the right order," she said, "and you cannot skip any of them." And she walked me through it. The credit card dispute first. A formal unauthorized use filing in writing citing specific charges, which would open an investigation and pause my liability while the issuer did their own review. Then a certified letter to Renee, not a text, not a call, certified mail with signature required, naming the amount, stating my position that no authorization was ever given and demanding repayment within 30 days. And then she said something I had not expected. "Before you do either of those," she said, "you should go to the county clerk's office." I looked at her. She was looking at her coffee. "Do you remember when your parents refinanced their house?" she said, "the second time." I told her I had heard them mention it, that was all I knew. "The second refinance required a co-signer," she said. "The bank required one given their credit situation. I was friendly with someone at the title company before she retired. She mentioned it to me once, not by name, but clearly enough. I have wondered for years whether you knew." I understood what she was saying before she finished the sentence. "I didn't know," I said. She looked at me. "Then go find out what's in the record." The weeks between that Saturday morning in Margot's kitchen and the day I walked into Carol's office were the strangest weeks I had spent in Harwick. Strange in a specific way I did not have a word for at the time, though I think I do now. They were the first weeks in my adult life where I was moving through difficulty without waiting for anyone else's permission or approval or understanding to do it. I had spent 6 years organizing my emotional life around what my family needed. I had sent money when the voice went tight. I had answered calls when the timing was bad. I had kept myself inside a careful radius of availability because somewhere in my childhood I had learned that staying available was the price of staying loved. And I had never questioned the trade because the trade had been built into the furniture of how I understood family before I was old enough to see the furniture clearly. Now I was moving forward on my own authority. I was making decisions about documents and attorneys and certified letters, and I was not checking with my mother first or softening my approach to protect Renee's feelings or backing away from what I knew to be true because speaking it out loud might create conflict. It felt like learning to walk after a long time sitting down. Unfamiliar and slightly uncertain, but also underneath that, correct. I ate dinner at Margot's twice that week. Not because either of us arranged it formally, but because on the first evening I had knocked to give her an update and she had gestured at an empty chair and said, "I made extra," which was Margot's version of an invitation, which was the only kind she ever gave, practical and without ceremony. We talked about the case and we talked about other things, and on the second evening, we did not talk about the case at all. We talked about her garden and a book she was reading, and whether the county was going to repave the street before winter, which they always promised and never did. It was the first time in a long time that I had spent time with another person without the time costing me something. Without arriving or leaving with the particular kind of tired you accumulate when the company of someone has weight attached to it. I had not known I needed that. I had not had the vocabulary to notice I was missing it. After the second dinner, I walked home along the fence between our yards and I stood on my own back step for a minute in the dark, and I thought about Renee's text sitting in my phone and the green ledger on my kitchen table and Carol's name in my contacts. I thought about my father's truck voice and my mother's rehearsed gentleness and the 6 years of $200 payments and the forged signature on a document I had never seen. I held all of it at once in the way you hold a complicated thing when you finally have enough room around it to see the whole shape. Then I went inside. I made tea. I opened the ledger to the accounting page, the one with the running totals, and I looked at it for a while and then I closed it and went to bed. That is as dramatic as those weeks were. They were quiet, they were mine, and they were enough. The certified letter went out the following Monday. I had drafted it in the paralegal language I had spent years learning to write, language that had weight because of its precision, not its volume, the amount, the dates, the merchants, my statement that I had not authorized any of the charges, my expectation of full repayment within 30 days. And the phrase at the close that I had written and revised 3 times, failure to repay within the stated period will result in my pursuing all available legal remedies. Available legal remedies in that context meant a great deal. I drove to the county clerk's office on my lunch break that Thursday. I gave the clerk the address of my parents' house and asked for the mortgage records. She found them efficiently and handed me a folder with 2 documents in it, the original mortgage and the second one, the refinance from 9 years before, the one my mother had mentioned in passing and my father had never mentioned at all. I carried the folder to a table by the window and I opened it. My name was on the second mortgage, printed in the typed portion of the document and then signed on the signature line and then notarized with a stamp and a date. The notary date was a Tuesday in November 9 years ago. I had been 22. I had been working a double shift at the medical billing office that Tuesday, which I knew because I had been doing that for months and the schedule had not changed. I had not been anywhere near a bank or a notary or any county office on that Tuesday or any Tuesday near it. My signature on that document was not my signature. I looked at it for a long time, then I took my phone out and photographed every page. I sat in the parking lot of the clerk's office for a while after, with the copies on my passenger seat and the afternoon light coming through the windshield at the specific angle that makes everything look a little unreal. And I thought about the $200 a month. I thought about the transmission and the deductible. I thought about my mother's voice going tight when she needed to ask me for something and the specific quality of that tightness, the rehearsed vulnerability of it. I thought about how many years that had worked on me. You owe us that much anyway. The sentence meant something different now. I called Margot from the parking lot. She answered on the second ring. I told her what I had found. She was quiet for a moment and then she said, "All right, now let's think about the right sequence." That phrase, the right sequence, had become a kind of anchor between us. She had said it the first morning at the kitchen table. She said it every time I called with a new piece of information. It meant, slow down, think before you move. The order of things matters as much as the things themselves. I want you to understand something about where I was in that parking lot because I think it matters. I was not happy. I am not going to tell you that finding a forged signature and understanding the full shape of what had been done to me felt like power. It felt like a specific kind of loss. The kind that arrives when you realize the thing you thought you understood had a false bottom all along. My parents had used my name on a debt without telling me. They had kept me paying small amounts into their household for 6 years, not because they needed the $200, but because people who are co-signed on your mortgage have a different relationship to your cooperation than people who are not. They had kept me in a position where saying no had costs they had never made visible to me. And when Renee decided to spend $11,847 on a beach vacation on my credit card, someone in that house had known my name was already on their most important financial document and had decided that made it fine. I sat with that for a long time, then I started the car and I drove to Margot's. We sat at the kitchen table again. I showed her the photographs of the documents. She read them with the stillness of someone who is not surprised by what she is seeing but is not going to pretend it is acceptable. Then she set the phone down. "You need an attorney," she said. "A real estate attorney, not a general practitioner, someone who knows mortgage fraud." She gave me a name. Carol Ways had an office on Meridian Street and came recommended by one of the senior partners at my firm, which was the kind of recommendation that meant something. She was a woman in her mid-50s with reading glasses on a chain and a direct way of speaking that I trusted immediately. I told her the full situation. I showed her the documents. I watched her read them with the focused attention of a professional who is building a picture as she goes. She looked up and asked me 4 questions. Had I ever received any disclosure documents for the second mortgage? No. Had I ever received any bank statements related to it? No. Had I ever received any benefit from the refinance proceeds? No. Had I ever, to my knowledge, signed any document associated with it? No. She set the papers down. She said, "Then the signature is forged, the notarization is fraudulent, and the people who presented this document to the bank are liable for both." She said it plainly, the way she said everything without drama, which was the version of it I needed most at that particular moment. I told her what I wanted. Not a criminal complaint, at least not yet. A letter from her office to my parents, formally advising them that the document contained a forged signature, that this constituted fraud under Indiana code, and that I was prepared to pursue all available legal remedies unless we could reach a resolution. The resolution I wanted had 3 parts: my name removed from the mortgage, a signed written accounting of what my parents had done with the refinance proceeds, and a signed repayment agreement from Renee for the full $11,847 with Renee's name on it, not my parents acting as her agents. Carol looked at me across the desk for a moment, then she said, "You've thought about this carefully." I told her I had had some time in a parking lot. She drafted the letter. I paid her flat fee. I drove home and I sat at my kitchen table and I opened the green ledger to a new page and I wrote the amount I had paid Carol and I wrote beside it what it was for. And for the first time in a long time, looking at a number in the ledger felt like something coming together rather than going out. The letter from Carol's office went to my parents by certified mail the following Friday. I watched the tracking notification on my phone on a Monday at 11:14 in the morning. 2 signatures recorded, Larry and Sandra Hendricks. They had both been home, they had both signed for it. What followed was the longest silence of my adult life and also in some ways the most useful one. There is something clarifying about waiting when you have done everything correctly and all you are doing is letting the situation develop. I had filed the dispute. The letter had been delivered. Carol was in contact with my parents' attorney. The documentation was complete. There was nothing left for me to do except continue living my life and allow the legal process to run at the pace legal processes run, which is slower than you want it to be and exactly as slow as it needs to be. I went to work. I drafted discovery requests and reviewed depositions and answered the phones and ate my lunch at my desk or twice that week, at Margot's kitchen table when the afternoon had room for it. I did my grocery run on Sunday the way I always did. I paid the credit card bill minus the disputed charges because I was not going to let the dispute result in late fees on the undisputed balance. I went for a walk along the river path on a Saturday morning and came home and made eggs and sat with the ledger open for a while, not writing in it, just looking at the columns the way you look at a thing that has been clarified by time. I did not call Renee. I did not check the family group thread. I had moved it to the bottom of my messages weeks before and left it there, and the silence from that direction had become, over time, a kind of peace. My mother called on a Thursday evening about 2 weeks after the letter. She had gotten through one of my firm's administrative lines rather than my direct number, which told me she had been thinking about how to reach me. I let it go to voicemail. She said she wanted to talk, not through attorneys, just mother to daughter. She said she was sure we could sort this out if we sat down together. She said she missed me. I listened to the voicemail twice. I wrote down the time and date it had been left. Then I called Carol and let her know my mother was attempting direct contact and asked her to send a short note reminding my parents' attorney that all communication should go through the proper channel. Carol sent the note. My mother did not call again. My mother sent one text on the day the letter arrived. It said, "Claire, we need to talk." I replied that my attorney had advised me to direct all communication through her office. That was not exactly what Carol had said, but it was close enough to the truth that I felt I could live with it. There were no more texts that day. Renee's response came 4 days later, not to Carol's office. To a group text that included me, my parents, two cousins I had not spoken to in years, and an aunt who lived in Ohio. It said, "Claire is threatening to destroy our family over a vacation she could easily afford. She's always acted like she's better than us. This is who she really is." 30 words, no denial of having used the card, no mention of authorization, no mention of the mortgage, just the story recasting me as the aggressor and the family thread as the venue for the recasting. I took a screenshot and added it to the documentation file. My mother texted me privately that evening. She said she hoped I would think about what mattered most. She said family could not be rebuilt once it was broken. She said she loved me, which was the truest thing she said and also the most insufficient one in that moment, because love, I had come to understand, was not the same as accountability, and the two had been allowed to stand in for each other in my family for a very long time. I did not respond. The 30 days came and went with nothing from Renee and nothing from my parents except the communication through their own attorney, which Carol had begun to field. My parents wanted to negotiate. They were willing to discuss the mortgage. They were not yet willing to make Renee part of the agreement. I held the line, not loudly, not with long phone calls or angry messages. Each time Carol came back to me with a new version of an offer, I read it carefully and I told her which parts were acceptable and which were not. The $11,847 had to be addressed. It had to be addressed by Renee directly. And the language had to be accurate, not the softened version that called what she had done a misunderstanding or a loan or anything other than what it actually was. I am a patient person. I have been patient in the particular way of people who grew up learning that patience was a survival skill. It was, for the first time in my adult life, doing exactly what it was supposed to do. My father called on a Thursday in September, not my mother, my father. He called from what sounded like his truck. He said my name the way he said it when I was small, and he had something difficult to tell me. "Claire," he said, "this went too far." I waited. He was quiet. "Renee told us you had offered the card," he said. "Your mother believed her, I believed her." He stopped. I could hear his breathing and the low sound of the engine. "Dad," I said, "the mortgage." There was a long pause. "That was not supposed to happen the way it happened," he said very carefully. "Your mother handled that paperwork. She said she had talked to you about it." "She did not talk to me about it," I said. "I have never signed anything." His silence this time was different from the other silences he had given me over the years. It was not the silence of a man choosing not to speak. It was the silence of a man who had known something and had been waiting for the moment when not knowing was no longer an option. I know, he said very quietly. Then two more words, almost too low to hear over the engine. He said, I'm sorry. Not sorry in the managed way people say it when they are apologizing for the fact that you are upset, not sorry as a prelude to a justification. Just the two words, bare and plain, like something he had been holding for a long time and had finally set down. Before I could answer, I heard my mother's voice in the background, sharp, Roy. And he said he had to go, and the call ended, and I sat with my phone and I let the two words sit there with me for a while. He had almost finished a sentence he had been carrying for years. And then my mother had said his name and he had chosen again. He had always chosen. But this time I had heard clearly that the choice was costing him something. I let it be sad, and I let it stay exactly the size it was. 3 days after my father's call, the attorneys began to move. A resolution took shape through Carol's office over the following weeks in the slow, careful way of things that have to hold up later. My name would come off the mortgage. My parents would provide a signed accounting of the refinance proceeds, and Renee would sign a repayment agreement in her own name for the full $11,847, acknowledging that the charges were unauthorized and agreeing to repay at $500 a month. Renee did not want to sign. She objected to the characterization. She wanted the language changed to reflect a loan. She wanted the amount reduced because she felt some of the charges were items I would have wanted to do anyway if I had gone on the trip, which was a sentence her attorney apparently delivered with a straight face. I held the line, not because I needed the war, because I had been very clear with myself in the parking lot of the county clerk's office and at Margaret's kitchen table and in the chair across from Carol's desk about what I was actually doing. I was not performing anger. I was not punishing anyone. I was documenting the truth and asking it to be acknowledged. I was willing to wait for that as long as it took. On a Thursday in October, Renee signed unauthorized use, full amount, $500 per month, her name notarized. Carol scanned it and sent it to my inbox at 4:17 in the afternoon, and I opened it at my kitchen table and I read every line twice. I opened the green ledger, I wrote the date, I wrote the amount. I wrote repayment agreement signed. I drew a single line under it, then I sat with the ledger for a long time and did not do anything else. My name came off the mortgage 6 weeks after that. The paperwork arrived by mail in a plain envelope that I opened standing at my kitchen counter on a Wednesday afternoon. I read it once. I set it down on the counter carefully, the way you set down something you have been carrying for a long time and do not yet fully believe you are allowed to put down. I did not cry. I went and made tea and I stood at the window and looked at Margaret's garden, which by October had been put to bed for the year. The beds cleared and the fence bare and the garden resting in the specific way of things that have been given what they need. I did not go back to Sunday dinners. My mother's text cycled through a few phases, wounded and then indignant and then carefully neutral and finally, after several months, something that was trying to find a register that was neither of those. I read them, I answered some. I did not answer the ones that began with any version of after everything we've done. My father sent one text, separate from my mother, about 3 months after everything was settled. It was 4 sentences. He said he hoped I was doing all right. He said he was proud of me. He said he was sorry for his part in things, which was the first time he had said his part and my part as separate things. He said he hoped I knew that he loved me. I sat with those 4 sentences for a long time. I wrote back 2 sentences. I told him I knew. I told him I hoped he was well. I meant both of those things. Renee made her first 3 payments on time. She missed the fourth by 11 days, then made it up. She did not contact me directly. I did not contact her. The documentation file sat on my laptop with a name and a year on it, and every month when the payment came through, I opened it and added one line. I do not know what story Renee tells about that summer. I have decided it is not a story I need to correct. The person who got to see all of it, from the first Saturday morning at the kitchen table to the signed documents that went into my files, was Margaret. I had called her at every stage. Not for permission and not for reassurance, but because she had started it by asking the right question, and the right question had earned the right to know how the story went. She listened without commentary most of the time. Occasionally she said good in the matter-of-fact way of a person checking a box. When Carol's letter went out, she said good. When Renee signed, she said good. When the mortgage paperwork arrived, she said very good, which was as close as she got to celebration. The evening the deed came off my name, I walked next door with a bottle of wine. She opened the door and looked at my face and smiled once quickly and stepped aside to let me in. Her kitchen was warm. The seed catalogs had been pushed to the far end of the table and replaced by a cutting board and something that smelled like garlic and good olive oil. She poured 2 glasses and we sat down, and I put the green ledger on the table between us. "I want you to see the last page," I said. She opened it. She looked at the final column for a long time, the numbers going in over 6 years, the money I had sent home, the amounts I had recovered, the costs of Carol's letter and the dispute process, the running total of what the repayment agreement would bring back over time. She looked at it the way she looked at a balance sheet, which is to say carefully and without sentiment, but also with something that might have been respect. "You're close to square," she said. I told her I had one more line to add. I took the ledger back from her. I turned to the last written page. I found the final blank line at the bottom of the column. I wrote Margaret Ellery. In the value column, I wrote one question asked at the right time, and then I wrote beside it in the smallest letters I could make and still read clearly, unpayable. She looked at it. Then she laughed, the real kind that starts before you have decided to let it, the kind that fills a kitchen. She shook her head and pushed the ledger back across the table. "You would have figured it out," she said. I told her I was not sure about that. She did not argue. She went back to the stove. She put a plate down in front of me that had real food on it, the kind someone makes for you when they have been thinking about what you need rather than what is easy. We ate at the big wooden table with the seed catalogs pushed aside and the wine between us. The garden outside was bare and resting. The ledger sat closed on the edge of the table like a finished thing. She did not tell me I had been strong. She did not say I had handled it well or that I should be proud of myself. She just passed me the bread and asked if I wanted more wine, and I said yes, and she poured it and we kept eating, and the evening went quiet around us in the good way, the way evenings go quiet when you are in the right place with the right person and there is nothing left that needs to be said. That ledger is still on my kitchen table. I keep it the way I keep things that have earned their place. I have not started a new one yet. I am not sure I need to. The numbers are all down already and every one of them is accounted for. I used to think family was the people whose last name you carried, the ones at the Sunday dinners, the ones whose problems arrived in your chest before your phone rang with the news of them, the ones whose voices had been in your ear so long you had stopped hearing them as voices and started hearing them as the shape of the world. I do not think that anymore. Family is the person who opens the door before you have finished knocking because she has been watching for you, and who sits down across from you and asks what you want before she offers you a single thing. Family is the person who gives you the tools to do your own work and then gets out of the way while you do it, and who is there at the end with a plate of warm food and no ceremony about it whatsoever. I have one person like that. She lives next door. She keeps a garden that goes quiet every October and comes back every April and has never failed to do either one. She pours wine in the right amounts. She lets silence sit on the table without trying to fill it. She is more than enough. The people who charged $11,847 to my card because they decided they were owed it found out eventually what you get when you push a patient woman too far. You do not get noise. You do not get a scene. You get a document. You get a line drawn in pencil in a green ledger, and when that line is drawn, it does not move. That's my story. One credit card statement that told me exactly what I meant to the people I had spent 6 years protecting. One green ledger that said the truth back in 2 clean columns down to the cent, and one woman next door who asked the one question that changed everything, which was simply, "What do you want?" If someone in your life keeps showing up, tell them. Not when it is easy, when it costs you something to say it, before you have to learn the hard way what their showing up was worth. If this story reached you tonight, share it with someone who might need it. And if you're new here, subscribe before you go. I'll see you in the next one.